I, Tentus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, 5th Ed D&D. When we last left off, we've been going over information on Dungeon Master's Guide, effectively, how you can be a Dungeon Master, and we were talking all about NPCs. I'm going to finish up talking about NPCs today, so let's dive into it. Contacts. Now, a contact is an NPC that your heroes might have some kind of connection to, but they aren't planning on going any adventures with these heroes, with your players. At most, they might provide information, some support, some advice, sometimes for free, sometimes with a cost, going to depend on the contact and how it's related to your players. Oftentimes, the players' own backgrounds give a good point in time where you can start adding in some contacts that they might have. And through the course of their adventuring career, traditionally they're going to find more contacts along the way. Now, depending on how in-depth your characters are connected with this contact depends on how much work you have to flesh them out. Very casual contacts, you don't have to have a lot of information about them because you don't need that. While on the other hand, a contact that has the potential to either at some point in time become an ally and fight with the heroes, or to become an enemy of theirs, you might want to flesh that out a lot more and have it ready just in case these two events occur, especially if it seems like these two events might occur. At least one of them. Now, at very least, you want to make sure to have whatever this contact you have's goal, and basically how that goal relates to the entire adventure. Having that little bit of information adds into why this character effectively will be called upon as a contact within this adventure. Now, there's a specific type of contact I do want to talk about, patrons. Patrons are effectively figures which reward players, reward heroes / adventurers for their various deeds, and give them new adventuring hooks. They're the people that hire on your characters to do things. A patron is going to be highly invested in the overall success of your players' missions, so therefore they might do more to help them out along the way and to succeed in the various quest, mission, adventure that they're going on, because this patron wants them to succeed. Now, generally speaking, a patron can take many different forms, but some of the more common ones are former adventurers that now have retired and still want someone to go basically questing in their stead, or perhaps a noble, which basically needs something to be done in their territory or a territory that they have connections with and are willing to pay / hire on your characters, your adventurers, in order to take care of said job. So you can see the nature of the patron is very important to the overall structure. Now, there are a time and a place where you might hire on a NPC for some kind of service. These are hirelings. The basics of hirelings is defined in the player's handbook, but that's more to a degree like hiring them actually on. We're going to talk about them a little bit from the NPC side. Hirelings are rarely important at all. There, in fact, could be a hireling where your PCs never actually converse with them, never actually even know their name. On the other hand, there could be hirelings that are in position that they could at some point in time become an ally of the players, a patron of them, or even an enemy. So you have to see the use and the position which the hireling is in before you're basically determining how much you have to determine about it. If the hireling is pretty much just there to do a job and be gone and they're never going to see it again, you don't have to put out a lot of details. On the other hand, if they're using it in such a way that it might evolve into something else, then yes, you're going to need more details. If a player is basically hiring a hireling for long-term periods of time, then rather than having him pay the normal way, you're going to actually make it part of his lifestyle cost, his or her lifestyle cost, and add that into that as the cost of having that hireling basically serving them in the retrospect that they've been hired for. Extras are a type of NPC you might not have to do anything with at all. Effectively, an extra is basically a character in the background. If I say in a situation there's a crowd in the background of a busy street, guess what? The majority of them are in fact extras. These characters effectively don't exist. They're just stand-ins for the existence of an NPC, and most of the time you don't have to do anything with them. Only when the PCs interact with them do they find themselves becoming more important, being elevated beyond the extra status. Since PCs can be a little unpredictable, it is important for you to prepare some information about extras that you might need. Things like names, a little bit of details about them. If push comes to shove, you could always use the generalized names from the player's handbook for the various races as just a way that you can give a character a quick name. But effectively, you're going to have to be ready to at least elevate a couple of these ones to an important status and have some general ideas about, that Jabberage one they're basically now talking to, what kind of character it's going to be. I have a couple of pre-made things that I could throw in there very easily. Now let's talk a little bit more about villains. We talked about building your villain in the first place, but it's important to talk a little bit more about villains in the different kind of retrospect. Because the fact is, the villain is effectively the purpose of your players. They're what keep your players employed. They give them job security. As long as the villain exists, so does the heroes that fight the villain. So you see there's a process to this entire thing. If they got rid of the villain, then they might not have a job anymore. So you can see the use of the villain is actually is an important dependence on the PCs of it. Now, I talked about building the villain, but a villain will have more than just the character itself it's built. A villain is going to have schemes, methods, and weaknesses that are important to note. The book gives listings of each of these that you could either roll for one randomly, or if you really wanted to, you could indeed select one that you think would be appropriate to your character, or you can come up with on your own as an inspiration to it. But it is important that if you're using a villain that you at least define what these sections to it, which help you add in that villain that you've already built into the world. Just because it's built in a certain way, you need these extra details to basically add it in. Now when you're building an NPC, effectively what you're doing is you're building a character. Most of the time, you're basically taking the same rules as you would have in the player's handbook to build a character, and you're building an NPC with those. There are some usual exceptions. Traditionally, when you're building your NPCs, you're making different choices for it than you would for a PC, usually choices more related to its actual job in society. On the other hand, for villains, there are two special options not available to heroes, two villain options that you can have. One of them is a clerical domain, and the other is a paladin oath. These function just the same as a normal paladin domain, cleric domain, or paladin oath, just like any of the others. The options are the death domain, basically for your evil clerics, your evil shamans, your evil divine users would have this, basically worshipping death. And for the fallen knight / anti-paladin is the oathbreaker oath, which is kind of an unusual thing because it's a paladin oath and it's called Oathbreaker. I know the unusual nature of it, but basically it's the anti-paladin build for paladin that you can use. The fallen knight is a better way of saying it. So, that's it for today. I finished up with NPCs. I went over everything you need to know about contacts, people that are usually going to provide you information that you don't have to build out that much. Help, information, assistance, advice, these sort of things, they don't traditionally fight with you. They could. I, of course, talked about patrons, a version of a contact that effectively hires your characters, hires them on to do a job, and is invested in their success. I talked about hirelings, people you pay money for to do a service, where the fact is, usually you don't have to do a lot to build these NPCs, but there are exceptions, times which they might become a different type of NPC, more important. I talked about extras. Everyone else in the background. Your players may never interact with them. They might just be placeholders for people living in this universe. But you have to be ready for your character to just pick someone randomly off the street and start talking to them, and guess what? They've made a more important NPC out of this person. Super important? No. But now they could learn this person's name, learn information about this person, get information from this person. So it's important to, of course, be ready for when they do that. I talked a little bit more about villains. A little bit more about defining some important information about them, their schemes, methods, and any weaknesses they might have that your players could exploit. These are important to help finish up defining your villains. And of course I talked about villains using the making NPCs using the character building rules, and two options specifically for villains. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about adventuring environments. Another big factor at it, because now we have all of our NPCs, creatures, everything else in our world. We need the environments that we're going to be placing in. We need to start making the world alive. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link description below. Regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.